This is episode 329 of Metabolic Radio. I'm your host, Matt Blackburn. I'm excited to have Stephanie Seneff back on the show. I interviewed her with Det Avalon on the topic of alpha-gal syndrome, and we also talked about glyphosate, but I really wanted to dive more into glyphosate on its own. So I finally purchased her book, and I read it on the plane on the way to California to celebrate my birthday with my family. Last week, I turned 38, biological age, and I always like bringing a book with me on the plane. And actually, I brought two this time. I brought Stephanie's book, and then I brought one on shungite, since I'm using that in my new structured water filter that's coming out soon. I actually brushed off the glyphosate topic for many years just because it didn't interest me, and I saw all of these products coming out as a solution for glyphosate, and there's a multi-level marketing company now that has a glyphosate removal product, quote unquote. But from a pure research angle, I think there's so many interesting avenues to go down with glyphosate. And if you didn't hear the previous show that we did with Det Avalon, I would go back and listen to that one first, because this one kind of builds on that episode. She talks about how she got into glyphosate, its connection to different diseases like autism, how it acts as a metal chelator, how it gets in the way of metabolizing alcohol. We touched briefly on the air component, where biodiesel and bioethanol has been found to contain glyphosate, which makes it airborne, and all of the hate that electric vehicles get because it's become so political. But a lot of those people that hate EVs don't realize that they're being pro-glyphosate in a way. So we talk about that. We talk about the shikimate pathway in bacteria and the havoc that glyphosate causes on the microbes, not only in our environment, but the microbes in our gut. I ask her about solutions like fulvic, clays, humic acids. She talks about that a little bit. Talk about the hormone connection with PCOS and glyphosate. I ask her about cannabis and tobacco and the glyphosate connection there. She talks about why she's a big fan of sulfur in the diet. Then I ask her a few listener questions, including the role of Glycine to detox glyphosate. Can you remove glyphosate from fruits and vegetables at home? Do ruminant animals have lower glyphosate? The Parkinson's disease connection. This episode is just jam-packed. So enjoy. Here is Stephanie Seneff. All right, Stephanie Seneff, welcome back to the show.
Great to be back. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about glyphosate again. Our last show we did with mutual friend Det Avalon on the connection with alpha-gal syndrome, which was fascinating. And listening to you talk in that show, I really wanted to dive deeper into glyphosate. And I finally bought your book, and recently, traveling for my 38th birthday, I read part of it on the plane. I didn't get through too much, but I got through the part where you were talking about its influence on the ecosystem and how you were inspired by Silent Spring, that book, and how it's affecting, the birds, the bees, the worms, the freshwater fleas, like down to like
Yes.
food web, right? So it's kind of a
Right.
situation.
Yeah. And of course, the humans.
Yeah. So I guess if you could, for those that didn't hear the previous episode, what is glyphosate and how did you learn about it?
Yeah. And I'll show you my book, I guess, to start off. This is my book, Toxic Legacy: How the Weed Killer Glyphosate is Destroying Our Health and the Environment. And glyphosate is the active ingredient in the herbicide Roundup, and people use it to kill the dandelions in their yard. You can easily pick it up at the hardware store, the garden shop, completely unregulated. The farmers use it extensively. It's by far the most used herbicide on the planet. The United States was in there early and deep. So we in Brazil are probably tied for the top place as far as the most consumption of glyphosate in our farming. And it's all over our food supply. It's hard to find food that isn't contaminated these days. I mean, Zen Honeycutt, my friend, she's a friend from way back. We met in Berlin, Beijing, China was where we met at a conference that both of us were speaking at. She's a wonderful person. She's founded the organization called Moms Across America, and they've done a lot of testing of all kinds of different food samples, fast food, school lunches, breast milk, infant formula, lots of different things. They're finding glyphosate everywhere. Over 90%, 95, 100% of the food samples from the fast food industry were contaminated. And it's high levels in popular foods with kids, like cereals, the grains, garbanzo beans, chickpeas, lentils, very high levels because they're sprayed right before harvest. So there's GMO, and people know about GMO. We've done a lot of fighting about trying to get GMO labeled. In the US, we don't. In Europe, they do. Doesn't really matter that much GMO because non-GMO often has higher levels than GMO. So it's not safe to just buy a non-GMO product. If you're trying to avoid glyphosate, you've really got to go certified organic. And even then, you're still going to get some because it's in the manure, it's in the rain. You can't avoid it, even if you're not using it explicitly.
That's scary. Yeah, I think I said in the previous show, I have, being off grid, kind of a rural property, and I have gravel roads going to my greenhouse and a lot of gravel, and the plants just come up through the gravel if you don't use the road fabric underneath. And I think a lot of, because road fabric is expensive.
Yes.
A lot of people up here in North Idaho, I'm sure, just go to Home Depot or go to the hardware store and buy the Roundup. And that's been recommended. And is there a favorite kind of healthy weed killer that you often recommend to people? Is it like vinegar and salt or something?
Yeah, there is a sort of formulation that's vinegar, salt, and a little bit of soap that you can make at home. And, it's not as effective as glyphosate. There's always manpower, right? Pull the weeds by hand. That's what when I managed my own yard, I'd pull the dandelions out try to get them out by the root, and get nice strong arms that way. So it's good exercise outside of the sun. People should do that instead of going to the gym and working out, just pull the dandelions. So I think it's interesting with farming because we've become, your sort of nations have transformed from an agricultural society to a technology. Various countries have transformed sooner or later. China late and U.S. early, and in that transformation, you basically almost, it seems like it goes with going to agriculture that's chemical-based agriculture because you don't have the manpower to pull the weeds because they're all building the technology. So, you sort of have more people to work on developing technology if you have to devote a smaller percentage of your population dealing with the farm. And that has been, I think, a driver. So I feel like, it goes together, which is unfortunate. And of course, when you have massive numbers of people in the city, they can't supply their own food. It's got to come from the farm. And the argument that Monsanto uses is that it's essential. And they're playing that card right now with the government because they're working at the state level, at multiple states, and also at the federal level to try to slip into a big agriculture bill, a couple paragraphs that say, basically like the vaccines, glyphosate is so essential, we can't live without it. And therefore, if somebody gets non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, too bad for them. There's no compensation. The company, it doesn't have to pay anything, no matter how bad their case is and how obvious it is that the glyphosate caused their problem. Too bad for them. This is what they're trying to do. They haven't, as far as I know, they haven't succeeded yet, but they're getting close. And that's one thing Zen has been working on, is trying to get people to actively communicate with their representatives to say, I don't want this. We need to fight back, because that's going to be really a sad day if they manage to get that kind of legislature. If they manage to get that through the legislative process, that's going to be a very sad day for humanity, I think, because we really have to move away from it. We have to figure out how to grow food efficiently without it. And we might be able to apply technology to that as well, because they're getting increasingly sophisticated technology built into tractors. I'm aware of these. There's something called the Monarch tractor, which runs on solar energy, and it has vision capabilities, and it can actually learn to recognize what's a weed. And it could use something harmless like boiling water or maybe laser, to specifically kill the weed and not the crop. I think it's possible. Just like we now have, drive cars that self-drive. That was another one that I was like, I remember at MIT, we had groups that worked on the self-driving vehicles, and it was so pathetic that I didn't think it would ever be ready for prime time, years ago. But now here it is, and I think it's going to become not surprising that a car could fix you up at home and takes you to the airport and there's no driver. I think that's going to happen in my lifetime, which is amazing. And that's a good example of how much technology has advanced. So it's kind of interesting that there's a hope I have that, agriculture became toxic in order to develop technology, but maybe technology can actually save agriculture and bring it back. That's kind of what I'm thinking now, trying to have some hope that we can straighten up the agriculture through technology and make our food safe again.
Absolutely. Yeah, I just ordered beneficial nematode beads, and I'm not sure what the beads are made of. It's a good company. Website I often use, Arbico Organics. I'm not an affiliate, but I use their stuff for my greenhouse because I'm dealing with mites, different types of mites. And so I have
Yeah,
beneficial predators in there. I have geodesic domes.
right.
Praying mantises are healthy in there. I have
Oh, that's wonderful. I feel sad about praying mantises. I remember back when I was a child, all the different insects and different kinds of life forms that I would find as I wandered around outside my suburban neighborhood. And praying mantises was one that was always very special when we'd find a praying mantis. And now, of course, I haven't seen one in decades. They're like gone, as far as I can tell. Also, toads. We used to have toads running around, ladybugs. I mean, all these things seem to be gone now. It's quite barren, even in residential neighborhoods. It's very sad to see the insects disappear. And it's a much bigger story because they're at the base of the food chain. The water fleas in the water at the bottom of the food chain, and then all the other animals eat them and go up the food chain, and you've got a lot of poison getting circulated among all the animals. And now, the big fish, of course, they're picking up mercury too. I mean, there's just like so many things to worry about in the food. And our government it wants to believe that it's okay. Yeah, a little bit of poison here and there, not a big deal, but it's not true. When you look at the health of our nation, and you compare that with the health of other nations, we're not doing well at all. And we're spending so much money on healthcare, and we're not seeing the return for our investment the way we should be.
Are you optimistic, like if that gets shut down, that there is, like if we stopped using it now, like to remediate the air, the water, the soil, is that even possible?
You mean, is it possible to stop? Or if you stopped, is it possible to get rid of it? Because it's two different questions and both of them are problematic.
Like,
Yeah, it's hard to get them to stop because I think the farmers kind of don't know how to do farming anymore without it. They feel that we would have to just all starve. I mean, that's kind of the argument they use. It's essential. We have to use it. If the company's going to fold because they get too many lawsuits, then we're going to be, in trouble. Everyone's going to starve. I mean, this is the kind of argument they use. It's pretty compelling, really, if it's true. I don't believe it's true. And as I say, I think if we understood the urgency to have to get rid of it, not just glyphosate. Glyphosate's the thing I've really studied. And I think glyphosate's extremely interesting and also a sleeper because there's other herbicides. There's many herbicides, all of which are toxic. Most of them are regulated. You can't just go down and buy it at the garden store. Glyphosate is supposed to be so safe that, you can just put it on your dandelions while your child's playing in the yard, no problem. I mean, it's just they've painted this picture that it's incredibly safe, and it is not. And that's the thing that bothers me because it's the most used on the planet. America uses more per person than other countries do, and we're very sick. And I think all of that ties together. I think the glyphosate is causing a lot more health problems than we realize, and in particular, autism. That was the one that I started with. I didn't tell my story, but basically I was around 2006, 2007 timeframe. I was watching the autism numbers go up every year. And I was watching the government say, oh, yeah, we're just diagnosing it more, not a problem, and I was like, no, something's going on here. I need to figure this out. So I just basically dropped everything I was doing and started looking at autism. And luckily was able to change my funding so that I suddenly was working on toxic chemicals in the environment. I was very fortunate that the same funding source that had been funding my research on developing online games. So I'm a computer scientist. I was developing code to allow an English-speaking person to practice their Chinese through robotic interactions with a online audio, system that could talk to you and provide you with help, as far as trying to speak in Chinese. So it was a kind of a cool topic that I was quite excited about at the time. But I switched over to the toxic chemicals because I was so concerned about the autistic situation, and anticipating the future looked really grim if it just keeps on going up like that. And, I did some projections, some rough projections with it, because it was exponential growth through through that first decade of this century. And if you just extend that exponential growth into the future, you can look at 2032 as the year in which half the children born would end up on the autism spectrum, 80% of the boys. I mean, that is absolutely unacceptable. And we're headed in that direction. It's still going up every year. Eventually, it's going to saturate. So I don't really think it's going to be half the children born in 2032. And I hope we're going to turn it around and figure it out before then, so that we don't hit that mark. But that is really, really scary. I mean, you're going to have, I think young people are going to decide not to have children because the risk is too great,
Yeah, I was in the education field working in it for about 5 years, and it was mostly in mathematics. And it was so sad to see just trying to teach them and looking in their eyes and seeing like a mental fog and just knowing everything they were exposed to and realizing, I mean, I feel like I was in that my whole childhood, and I was kind of a late bloomer with my brain.
You might have had some exposure, huh?
So it's probably metals, glyphosate. I mean, you name
Yeah.
it. Just
And they go together too, because glyphosate makes the metals a lot more toxic than they would otherwise be. Glyphosate is synergistic with a lot of other exposures, and that's part of the problem. It helps everything else to be more toxic because it disrupts the liver's ability. Even acetaminophen, for example, right? I don't know if you've heard lately, there's some chatter around the idea that Tylenol might be connected to the autism epidemic. Have you heard that?
wow.
Yeah, Kennedy's been kind of bringing up that idea. I had actually written a paper a long time ago, over a decade ago, linking Tylenol to autism. And others have written papers on that too. It's interesting. But then I also realized that glyphosate disrupts the body's natural mechanisms to detoxify Tylenol. So this is where you get the synergy, and that's true with a lot of all these fat-soluble poisons that we have. Also, a lot of the agricultural chemicals are fat-soluble, and they need to be solubilized through mechanisms that glyphosate disrupts in the liver. So it's like really bad that glyphosate helps everything else to be more poisonous than it would otherwise be.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, you look at, I do really well on high quality pasta, and I'm like half Italian, but you look at gluten,
I know.
alcohol exposure. I feel like back in the day, I mean, grandma and grandpa were just like drinking tons. I mean, I'm sure.
Oh, I know. Absolutely. I really wish that they would pay attention to that with alcohol, because, ethanol, it's quite, in fact, Zen Heineken has tested wines. The Germans have tested beers. They're all contaminated with glyphosate. And so, and whenever they do these studies, you see all these studies and about different kinds of fats and which ones are good and which ones are bad, and we get all these sort of conflicting evidence from the various studies, and you're all confused about what's good and what's bad, None of the studies actually considers, oh, maybe there's something else in here besides this lipid that's causing the problem. And it's certainly true for alcohol, because when you drink alcohol, you're drinking glyphosate, And I think the glyphosate may be a big part of why ethanol is toxic. Again, because glyphosate disrupts the enzyme that metabolizes. I actually have looked into that, because ethanol, it gets converted to acetate in a couple of steps. And in between, it's a very reactive acetaldehyde molecule called acetaldehyde. It goes from ethanol to acetaldehyde to acetate in 2 steps. And there's a couple of enzymes that take care of that. And the one, acetaldehyde dehydrogenase, is problematic because it gets suppressed by glyphosate. So that means the acetaldehyde sticks around in the liver, and that causes liver damage. So I think there's a lot of situations where glyphosate is disrupting the enzyme that would normally protect you from something. Same thing with sulfite to sulfate. The enzyme that converts sulfite to sulfate is suppressed by glyphosate. And sulfite is very reactive, very toxic. Sulfate is essential, and you've got a problem there. And acetate is basically the fuel to make the ATP in the mitochondria. So acetate's a terrific molecule, but acetaldehyde is highly reactive. So you have all this stuff in chemistry that matters, that the enzymes are working. And in fact, people who can just drink like a fish and never get sick. I know people like that. And I bet you they have evolved to have an incredibly good acetaldehyde dehydrogenase enzyme that whisks away the acetaldehyde before it's a problem.
Interesting. Yeah, I interviewed several years ago a guy that makes GMO products, like, and one of them's like pre-alcohol drinks. You like take a little shot of this bacteria. I think it's lactobacillus.
Oh, that makes the alcohol?
It breaks down
Oh,
aldehyde before it hits the liver.
ah, it has the enzyme, right?
Yeah,
Mm,
I wonder if that's
that's smart. Yeah, and I suspect that the microbes that have the enzymes are being suppressed by glyphosate, so that's another problem, right?
interesting. Yeah, it's yeah. The last show with you mentioned the self-driving vehicles, and Tesla gets a lot of hate because EVs have become political because the way the CEO acts, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, I know.
But you made me think with I went down a rabbit hole and actually found your article from years ago where you were talking about the glyphosate connection to bioethanol,
Yes,
biodiesel.
right.
A huge article. It was almost like a dissertation. I was mind blown, and that's one aspect that the EV haters never consider.
I know, absolutely. I think that that's a good point, and I guess I know the solar panels are not that healthy. They've got problems too, so it's a different kind of problem. But there wouldn't be a glyphosate problem, you know.
Yeah, I mean the whole supply chain, wherever you look, is not ideal right now, right? Whether it's like
Yeah, it's really, really hard to get back to a supernatural state, which I feel like I kind of envy the people that lived in the 1400s, in some sense, because they didn't have all these toxic chemicals. I think I've really come to believe that the chemical industry is a monster, and they're producing all these chemicals that are so toxic, and then they're pretending they're not, and they twist and turn the study to make it look like it's okay. They hide the evidence. They're very good at that, and they don't mind the fact that they're poisoning everybody. It just really frustrates me, the agrochemical industry and the pharmaceutical industry, both of them.
it's really sad. Yeah, and another major player here is the shikimate or mechanism is the shikimate pathway,
Absolutely.
and that's
Yeah,
something that we don't have that bacteria have. Is that correct?
that's right. The whole pathway, which is an important pathway in the bacteria, and most of them have it, and most of them are sensitive to glyphosate because of that. EPSP synthase is the specific enzyme that they determined gets severely suppressed by glyphosate. And it's a critical enzyme in that pathway. So the whole pathway gets disrupted because of that. It's kind of like the statin drugs, which disrupt the very first step in the production of cholesterol, which also produces a disruption of many other molecules that are essential that come out of that pathway. So anyway, the EPSP synthase gets blocked, and the microbes can't make the products of that pathway. And then also the precursors can build up to toxic levels. So there's always two problems when you have a blockage, which is that what doesn't get removed and what doesn't get produced. Both are problematic. And it's the aromatic amino acids which are essential for us because we can't make them. We don't have the pathway. Tryptophan, tyrosine, and phenylalanine come out of that pathway. The microbes make them for the host. We get them in our food as well. So you could probably just eat more, but the food is probably also has less because it's exposed to glyphosate. The plant is going to be affected as well. So we've probably got deficiencies in those critical amino acids, which are not only building blocks of the proteins, but also precursors to an incredible number of incredibly important biologically active molecules. All the serotonin and melatonin and thyroid hormone, the skin tanning agent melanin, dopamine, epinephrine, all of those come out of that shikimate pathway. So they're all going to be problematic if the microbes can't keep up and produce enough for the host.
Do you think that's a huge part of the epidemic of anxiety, depression? I mean, every neurological, you mentioned autism, because if you don't have
ADHD. I think so. Both the emotional and the sort of cognitive issues are consequence of. I think glyphosate's a major contributor to this sort of brain fog and all of these problems we're seeing with anxiety and depression, ADHD, Alzheimer's even. I mean, the elderly, Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease, dementia, autism, ADHD, all of those neurological problems. I think glyphosate's a major contributor. In fact, these diseases are going up dramatically exactly in step with the rise in glyphosate usage. It's a perfect match for all of them, the autism, the ADHD, the depression, suicide rates are going up exactly in step. I mean, it's amazing. Vitamin D deficiency even. And that's also because I think of the disruption of pathways involved with vitamin D.
Well, on that topic, like on social media, there's a resurgence of circadian biology, and I've watched it the last 3 years, just blowing up in popularity, which is great. And just, encouraging people to not look at their phones when they wake up and block blue light at night and get the sun in the morning and all this basic stuff. But that's required to convert these aromatic amino acids into the neurotransmitters, right? The stimulus of,
Yeah, right. And of course, also melanin, the skin tanning agent, is also in protecting you from sun toxicity. And so when that's deficient, you're going to be more likely to have sensitivity to the sun.
and glyphosate. I mean, one of the minerals, I think you mentioned was it the +2 cations, that
Hmm.
copper, and you need copper to make melanin, right?
I know, that's right. The minerals are also problematic. And I've written about manganese, which is an important one. I have a whole paper on manganese and how that gets disrupted by glyphosate. And glyphosate's correlated with Parkinson's disease, which is also known to be associated with excess manganese building up in the brainstem nuclei.
Wow. Yeah, a lot of the people I interviewed are into hair tissue mineral analysis and looking at like the mineral grid and balancing it. And a lot of them say that it's the forms are wrong that we're getting in these, like we're getting toxic.
+2, yeah, it's a +2, +3 kind of thing. And glyphosate messes up that as well to keep it at the right level so that it's safe. That's true for iron too, +2 versus +3. And there's a whole system in place that, that allows the iron to be transported to where it's needed safely. The body has all these mechanisms, chelators for iron that take it to where it needs to go, release it carefully in the situation where it's needed and it can be used. But those get messed up by glyphosate too. So, I mean, it's just, and of course, glyphosate holds on to these things too and doesn't let go, except when it gets into an acidic environment. And that's, I think, part of the problem with the blood is that when the pH of the blood goes down at the brainstem, glyphosate unloads its cargo, which can be something like aluminum or arsenic or manganese. So these are all problematic, because they're not being properly distributed in the body because glyphosate is messing up the system.
I've heard it said recently someone was recommending blood donation to to lower glyphosate, but I know if someone's already on the verge of iron deficiency in different stages, anemic or not, that could be an issue. But what are your thoughts on that? Do you get rid of some if you if you donate?
Yeah, I've wondered about bleeding. You know how they used to do bloodletting as a way to treat. When you get rid of a lot of your blood, you're also getting rid of glyphosate at the same time. Which is crazy. But yeah, I don't know. It seems I wonder, it would be interesting to sort of replace your blood with healthy blood, right? So strip it all and get yourself completely replaced with healthy blood. Would be interesting to do that. I don't know if people have tried things like that.
Yeah, maybe the elite are already doing that. I don't know.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's interesting. I see another question I had for glyphosate detoxing supplements. Like over the years, I've seen different health leaders talking about like selling clay, liquid clay,
Yes.
stuff like that.
Yeah. Bentonite clay, fulvic acid, humic acid, those are complex organic molecules from the soil. They're able to bind to glyphosate. They might even carry enzymes that can break it down, which would be really cool. And the other thing I wonder about is certain bacteria that can break down glyphosate. That's what you need because it's actually a very difficult molecule for most species. They're stumped by it. There's a particular CP bond, it's called carbon phosphorus bond, that's quite unusual in nature. There are not many molecules that have that. And glyphosate has that, a carbon phosphorus bond. It attaches a phosphonate to a carbon atom. And that bond is hard to break. And that's what makes it part of what makes it so toxic and also makes it durable so it doesn't easily break down. But there are some microbes that can, and there are some members of the class of Acetobacter that can do that. So I found an article about Acetobacter breaking down glyphosate, and I was like, yes, because the Acetobacter is in vinegar, sauerkraut, the fermented foods. So I've been saying that if you eat fermented foods, you might be getting enzymes that could break down glyphosate, which would be, or even getting microbes that can make enzymes even better, right? Colonizing your gut. So those microbes can just clear the glyphosate for you, which would be fantastic if you could manage to cultivate those and keep them going.
Super cool. I have to perfect the sauerkraut. I used to just buy it at the store, but I'm sure it's better to grow my own cabbage. And
You probably could. That would be fun to do. Yeah, I get a big jug of it at Costco, so it's nice organic sauerkraut.
nice. Yeah, that's interesting. What about like clinoptilolite? Have you ever seen an effect from that? or like zeolites or
Zeolites, I've seen people recommend them. Yeah. I think also for chelating metals, right? Toxic metals.
I was curious if you'd ever seen anything on glyphosate with that or
I think there have been people who have suggested it for glyphosate. I mean, anything that can bind well can bind to various toxic exposures and hopefully take them out. The only thing I don't like is it doesn't really get rid of it. It binds to it, it comes out, and then it goes someplace else, right? It's not gone. So I really like it when you have enzymes that can break it down. You can also break it down non-enzymatically with reactive oxygen. So, you can have things like chlorine dioxide, chlorine in particular. Of course, chlorine is very toxic, but I'm very glad that they purify the water supply with chlorine, because chlorine is supposed to be there to kill the microbes so that the water is safe to drink. But it also kills the glyphosate, which is really, really fortunate because I think otherwise we would have a lot more problems with glyphosate in our water supply if they didn't use chlorine in purifying the water at the purification plant.
that is really interesting. Yeah, I went to it down in San Diego wastewater treatment plant, and it's wild. It looks it looks like a crazy facility with all the stuff they have that they're treating the water with.
Yeah, it makes you wonder about just drinking the tap water. How do we, it's becoming harder and harder, I think, to assure that your water is safe. And not just from things like glyphosate, but also I think of all the toxic drugs that people take, like cancer treatment, and they can just not metabolize it. So they're peeing it out. It gets into the sewer system, and it makes its way God knows where. And of course, affects the fish. I mean, all these toxic chemicals that are drugs that you take to do things like kill cancer cells, they are not safe. And even something like metformin, I was really surprised to see. Metformin is a very popular drug for diabetes, and it's very sturdy. It doesn't break down easily. You pee it out, it gets into the water supply, and it's actually causing a lot of trouble for the fish.
A lot of biohacker anti-agers are doing it too. Like I think Sinclair, he takes it or recommends it. And yeah, I don't get into that stuff.
Oh, what? Metformin. Is that what you're talking about? Yeah. Yeah. No, I don't take any synthetic drugs. I'm very pure that way.
I know TRT is super trendy right now, even just small amounts, but that's something that I want to wait. I'll keep my elk antler and Shilajit as long as I can.
Yeah.
um, is there a testosterone lowering connection? I forget if we'd spoken about that in the last one with glyphosate.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's complicated, I guess. I don't have that story straight. It definitely messes up testosterone for sure. It almost might be too much testosterone, like in utero, and for the females especially. There was an interesting study that showed they looked at female babies when they were born, and there's a metric that's called the anogenital distance. You can imagine what that might be. And when it's long, that's a link to excess testosterone exposure in utero. They sort of learned that some time ago. And they actually did a study where they measured glyphosate levels in the urine of pregnant women shortly before, in their last trimester. And then they correlated that with this metric, and they found a statistically significant correlation that excess exposure to glyphosate, assuming from that urine test that the child was getting too much as a fetus, that caused this length to be too long, which indicates the testosterone exposure, and which is also connected to the most common cause of infertility in women, which is polycystic ovary syndrome, PCOS, I guess. Polycystic ovary syndrome is also something that's going up dramatically in our population and is causing infertility problems for women. And they become kind of masculine, they have masculine features, extra hair, facial hair, and that sort of thing. And it's those kids who have that long metric have a much higher risk of developing PCOS when they grow up, which then ties PCOS to glyphosate, so.
Yeah, and I know there's a big excess estrogen component with PCOS, right? Like all the xenoestrogens in our environment.
Yeah, well, it's the testosterone partly they become obese, and then the fat cells produce testosterone and release it. So you're getting too much testosterone. There's sort of a balance between estrogen and testosterone that gets messed up in the whole system, in part because of excess fat cells, and then why are the fat cells there? You have to go back and figure out all the endocrine stuff that caused them to gain weight, because that's the other thing. Obesity is one of those conditions that's perfectly matched to glyphosate. Every time a country starts adopting Western food, they start getting fat. You see that all around the world. And America got fat first because we were exposed to glyphosate first. And we've got a huge problem with, no pun intended, with obesity. And, this GLP-1 business is really interesting to me too, because I've been quite fascinated with these GLP-1 analogs, which are like Ozempic, they're super popular right now. So many people are taking this drug. Really scary to me. I have a feeling it's not going to end well because they're starting to see some really nasty symptoms, even things like issues with your eyes, going blind and that sort of thing. They're dangerous, I think. And what's another thing I only just recently saw, which surprised me, statin drugs. I hate statin drugs, and I've written about statin drugs. I think they have a lot of really nasty side effects. And they hit that mevalonate pathway early on, which is the pathway that leads to cholesterol, but it also produces a whole bunch of other things that are super important, one of which is vitamin D. So you get deficiencies in a lot of important molecules because you're blocking that initial step in the mevalonate pathway. And this paper that came out very recently, like within the last month or two, I just read across it, showed that statin drugs greatly reduce the level of GLP-1 in the gut. So the stomach, there are cells in the stomach that make the GLP-1, and they make it under influence of various hormones and whatnot, things that are going on with the bacteria. And when you have statin drugs, it messes up that system, and they make a lot less, like half as much as they should. So this is perfect for the industry. You give them a statin drug. And of course, statins cause diabetes. That's also been shown. And diabetes is a risk factor for heart disease. So you're trying to, why am I taking this drug that's increasing my risk of a disease that's a risk factor for heart disease? It's so crazy. But this GLP-1 link was really cool, really surprising, and kind of made sense because it explains the link to diabetes. And so the thing is, if you have a problem with GLP-1, stop taking your statin drug, to save a lot of money, because the industry loves it. Now they can just prescribe both drugs and they can go home happy.
That's amazing. Yeah. But usually for people that want to lose weight, I often recommend get a sauna, sweat in a sauna.
Yeah, nice.
Because a lot of stuff's stored in the fat, right? A lot of stuff that disrupts metabolism. And
yeah.
Kind of it's like low hanging fruit. I did just interview a girl that's doing the sugar diet. So that's another way. You have the carnivore diet, and on the opposite side, you have the high carb, low fat diet. Supposedly both.
That's supposed to be a way to lose weight.
Right.
I don't figure that one. I definitely go on the low carb side,
Not white sugar, but yeah.
But one other thing that I worry about, a lot of people are like, okay, fats are bad, sugar's bad, I better eat protein, right? So they eat a high protein diet. That's not good, because if you're eating more protein than you need, you basically are burning protein for energy. And when you do that, you've got nitrogen left over as a waste product, and that's going to give you ammonia. Ammonia is really bad. And if you've got liver problems because you're being exposed to glyphosate, your liver's not going to be able to clear the ammonia that comes from the metabolizing the proteins, which you weren't supposed to do. And the ammonia comes up to the brain and causes brain fog, So I think people are so confused about what's good, what's bad, but they have to look at the toxic chemicals that are in the food to figure that out.
That's a really good point. Yeah, everyone's definitely protein obsessed right now. And I feel like the daily requirement keeps going up and up. It's 200 grams. No, it's 300 grams.
Yeah. And I mean, it's also the thing that fascinates me is the aminos. Like when you go to the health store, and you see all these big shelves of all these different aminos. Like you have these big jars of aminos, which is just like a whole mix of all kinds of different synthetic amino acids, and then you can get glycine, or you can get, arginine, and all these different individual amino acids that you can buy. It's just like a huge industry selling individual amino acids. To me, that's a reflection of the fact that you can't break down the protein. So when you eat the protein, and glyphosate is messing up the microbes that help you digest it. That's what's going on with the gluten intolerance, I believe, because the lactobacillus are critical. You'd mentioned, like the lactobacillus provide enzymes that help you break down the gluten. Gluten has a lot of proline, and proline is problematic because it's a difficult amino acid to break apart from its neighbors. And so, but the lactobacillus make 4 different enzymes that specialize in breaking apart the proline to help out the host. And so you can digest the gluten. So if they're not working properly, and they're very sensitive to glyphosate, if the lactobacillus aren't working properly, then gluten doesn't get digested. You have these peptides that stick around. So you can't use the amino acids as fuel in those peptides. They go into the colon instead. They don't absorb they're supposed to absorb in the upper gut. And they get broken down into amino acids. Amino acids can be used to build new proteins. That's great, right? You're recycling. But if they don't get broken down, then they end up as peptides in the colon. And that's when the guys in the colon, the bacteria in the colon, they know how to break it down, but they break it down all the way and use it for energy. And then you have ammonia left behind because you can't keep it as amino acids anymore. You can't absorb it. Once it gets into the colon, it's no longer a source of amino acids for the host. At that point, it's just a source of nitrogen, which is going to be ammonia, which is going to be toxic, you know? So then you take all these amino acids as supplements and then you eat a lot of protein. And now you've got a really big problem with too much nitrogen in your system. And especially if your liver's not working. So
yeah, that's intense. My plumber and a lot of people up here, contractors that I meet up here in Idaho, a lot of them have gut issues. And I wonder if that's behind it, whether it's Crohn's or.
Yeah, I know. It's interesting. I don't know if you'd have a forest industry there.
Mm-hmm.
Do they use glyphosate? Because I know they use the glyphosate in a lot of the forest industry. For example, in Canada, they use extensively to kill off the hardwood trees, and they grow pine trees because they grow fast and making toilet paper, you know.
Wow.
There's a huge problem with glyphosate in Canada, New Brunswick, in the forest industry. And I don't know whether in Idaho that also applies, but it might.
I haven't heard of that, but I'll delve into it. Yeah, that would be scary.
Are you surrounded by forest? You probably are, right?
Completely, yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing privacy, but
I love it up there. I've actually been up into I love the drive from Boise up into the Sawtooth Mountains. You know, they're so gorgeous. And I've stayed at that lake there. Oh, what's it called?
It's like I think there's like one of the biggest military submarine bases under that lake.
Oh, really? Wow, I didn't know that.
Monterey is close to me, and then more south is Coeur d'Alene. So yeah,
it's pretty up there. It's really pretty.
It feels very clean. Like most of my friends and family are down in Southern California, and I just got back from there, and I always feel every time I get there, and the whole time I'm there, I feel like my body's like something's trying to get in. It's just like that feeling the whole time.
I agree with that. I noticed that when I first started coming to Hawaii. We lived in Cambridge, of course, because I work at MIT, and Cambridge air is probably not that great. And the first time we managed to get away for a whole month in August and come to Hawaii, and I was really struck by how much I appreciated breathing. The air would just seem so much cleaner. I noticed that more than almost anything else during that month that I was here.
Yeah, even with all it's truck and truck country up here, and even with all the
oh yeah, you get some diesel.
Full rolling, guys, it's still the air's still better, and I guess it's just the density of trees. I mean, the Google Maps or whatever, and zoom out, it's just the whole.
Yeah, I think trees are very nourishing, right? They actually release a lot of interesting things that are healthy.
Yeah, I think I've taken tinctures of the resins, like pine resin, and what's the other one? Yeah, all the terpenes that they release, and yeah, I try to get out in the forest as much as possible.
Yeah, I love the forest too. I've always enjoyed walking in the forest. Yeah.
Breathing dry salt to clear the respiratory system, and
I don't know about that.
Finding pure sodium chloride into particles, and it's like a dry, like instead of breathing ocean air, it's hydroscopic, so it's super dry, so it draws mucus out. And
wow, I don't know about that at all. That's interesting. I imagine. Do you think breathing the air from the ocean is also healthy for that same reason?
Less so, yeah, because it's hydrated salt. So this one, yeah, it's so dry. The particles are so dry that I sneeze within 30 seconds.
Oh, that's so interesting. Wow, I haven't heard about this.
Yeah, if you look, it goes way back to like salt caves, I think in Europe and certain countries. So it's like an ancient therapy, but you could basically get like a salt. It's like a sauna. It's like a wooden box, so you could build.
So maybe swimming in the Dead Sea.
Right. Amazing, but yeah. I did want to see. We did have some questions that people.
Okay.
And because it's told you it's been a hectic morning with the generator, so I didn't have time. That off-grid life is sometimes stressful. Yeah. So this this was one that you kind of touched on before. Can glycine really detox glyphosate out of humans? Because that's
Yeah. So I wouldn't say it can detox it out, but it can outcompete it, which is important. So I think you really want to eat a lot of foods that contain glycine in order to encourage your proteins not to pick up glyphosate and put them into the protein. Because that's the thing that my book really focuses on, arguing that glyphosate is acting as an amino acid analog to glycine and getting into proteins by mistake. And I definitely think that's happening. It's something that the industry is pushing back on. They're saying, no way, it's not possible. But when you look at their own research, the best way to explain their discoveries is to say that's what's happening. And they just refuse to say that. So we're kind of in an impasse there. But I wish somebody who's a chemist would do the definitive experiment to prove that it is happening. Because I think you could, I'm not equipped to do it, but I would love to see that happen to show that it is happening. Because I think, and once you realize that, for me, that's been a big focus to find the proteins that have what I call a glyphosate susceptibility motif, which is more specific than just having a glycine. The glycine has to be essential at the active site. It has to be often is binding phosphate. There's a specific situation in which glyphosate can easily get in. And if it does, it ruins the protein. And so I've collected a list of proteins for which I suspect that's true. And many of them have been shown to be suppressed by glyphosate. So there's kind of like a big puzzle that you saw putting together the pieces in different dimensions with any disease that's going up dramatically in match to glyphosate's usage going up, has certain enzymes that are associated, defective versions of those enzymes are associated with that disease. Glyphosate suppresses that enzyme. You sort of connect all those dots to say the best way to explain this is to say that glyphosate got into that protein, messed it up, and caused that disease.
wow. Yeah, that is scary. We had a few questions. Is it possible to remove glyphosate from fruit and vegetables to get it home?
You can't wash it off. Especially because it's going to be, I think it's embedded in the proteins inside those. In fact, you can get a false reading on glyphosate if you don't do it right. And that was one of the things that I like to talk about, a paper an unpublished study that was done by people who were commissioned by Monsanto way back when, I think in the 1980s. And they did this experiment with bluegill sunfish, and they exposed them to radio-labeled glyphosate so they could track the radio label. And then they looked at samples of the tissues of the sunfish, and they found the radio label in the tissues. And then they said, well, let's test for glyphosate using the normal glyphosate test. And they came up short. Only 20% of the radio label could be accounted for as glyphosate. Then they said, oh, well, let's just see if we can break down the proteins into individual amino acids and see what happens. And so they did that. They added enzymes that could break down the proteins, and then their yield went up to 80%. So, and they said perhaps it was incorporated into the protein. That was their words. And this was 1980s. And to me, that almost proves that that's what's happening,
Jeez. Yeah, you just made me think, because I interviewed a guy that's basically a broker for farmed fish from pools and fisheries, like isolated, because you always hear wild caught fish is better. And
oh, for sure. Yes.
it's definitely better than California. I mean, it tastes very, very clean, but still, I try to only eat farmed that I ship to my door. But you made me think with that I guess it depends if glyphosate's, getting it into the water of the pools where they're raising the fish, right? That would determine the load that they have.
Yeah, I know. And they're probably feeding them glyphosate contaminated feed.
That's true.
Yeah, I only eat wild caught fish. I'm really upset about the salmon. They have this GMO salmon. I like salmon, but I never order it at the restaurant anymore unless they can assure me that it's wild caught. And when I buy it, I always buy wild caught. And even the wild caught is probably problematic. But
yeah, the guy I interviewed said they do special feed. Like in my lake that I have, of like a 2-acre lake or so, I throw in black soldier fly larvae and.
Oh, that's so great. Do you actually fish from the lake?
Yeah.
You eat the fish? You are that's cool.
Release. I need to learn. I wasn't raised. I went fishing once in Mexico growing up. So I have to I have friends that could teach me.
You're going to learn to be able to subsist off your own land, right?
Yeah, I've thrown healthy bacteria in there. That was the cool part about your book. I could tell. I mean, if I didn't get into health, I would have worked at a zoo or, see.
Yeah.
I love animals a lot.
Right. I do too.
Fascinated with aquariums and just the food web.
Me too. Yes. Uh-huh. And I've been to many zoos. It's sad to see them locked up, but I do love the animals.
Yeah. For my birthday, we went to the Scripps Aquarium down the street from where I grew up, and they had giant Pacific octopus and
Yeah,
jellyfish, and it's just so relaxing. Like,
it is. Yes.
but anyway, yeah, it's it's wild to think about. I mean, I just look at my lake every day, and I just like, how can I make this healthier? And
Yeah, that's great.
bacteria, and fortunately, it's fed by a spring, so it overflows.
Oh, that's very nice. Yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
This is a good question. Do ruminant animals have a lower toxic load of glyphosate?
I doubt it. I guess the way they're phrasing it, they think they might, huh?
Like, I guess versus like chickens or
I mean, they have a very fancy gut, and it's pretty amazing what that gut does. The way the microbes work in the ruminant gut. They can eat grass, which we obviously can't. That's one thing I like about cows is that they convert grass into edible food. So, and of course, I'm also upset about them trying to get rid of the cows because I think that cows, grass-fed beef, is a very healthy food.
yeah. I made a post the other day because I tried, I used to be fruitarian, I used to be raw vegan. I did so many dietary experiments, and I think I tried plant-based 4 times back in the day. And I posted the other day how I wish that we would at least advance the way that we kill animals as far as I'm concerned. And I've looked into the literature on carbon dioxide. You could put animals to sleep where it's painless.
Mm.
No bolt, no
You wouldn't have to do some kind of butcher type of thing.
do it better. I think I wish that like the Brian Johnsons and the vegans and stuff would like be pushing us that way,
Right. Right. Yeah.
just for ethical. And I always think there's better ways to do things, going back to your technology, stuff.
Right. Yes. Uh-huh. I would agree. I mean, I think it would be nice if they don't suffer.
Yeah. I would imagine it would affect how it emotionally affects us. I'm sure we absorb some of that.
Yeah, if they're dying through violence, that they release all kinds of toxic things probably as they're dying, right? Whereas if they die peacefully, they don't. So I think that's a good point.
Hmm. Let's see. Someone said, heard this from a large scale agro guy. It's a red flag. He said, Roundup only binds once. So if you spray it on the crop, it will bind the minerals in the crop. But if soil, it will not bind the minerals in the soil anymore. Have you heard that argument?
He's saying it's already bound and therefore it can't bind something else. Yeah. Well, it does. In fact, I remember a study that was amazing that they had murky soil, murky water, which had a lot of seaweed. I had various kinds of algae growing in the water, and they put glyphosate into the water. And then they went shortly thereafter, they measured the level of glyphosate in the water and went way down. And then they were like, well, what happened to the glyphosate? And then they found that it was pulled into the biomass that was in the water. It sucked up the glyphosate and sort of cleaned it out of the water. But then the biomass is loaded with glyphosate. And that's what the manatees eat, in Florida. The manatees are really sick right now. And they're eating the greens that have soaked up all the glyphosate that's pouring into the water from the surrounding, both the homes that are using glyphosate on the weeds, but also the sugarcane. They use glyphosate as a ripener at the end of the season on the sugarcane. So all that glyphosate, and they even put glyphosate into the water to kill some invasive weeds in the water. So there's lots of glyphosate in the Florida waterways, which is what's causing the manatees to be very sick. They've really gotten in trouble.
That's so sad. I should have done research before this, but I met Paul Stamets once at a conference, the mushroom guy, or he's written a lot on mushrooms. Was that one thing that could bioremediation? Has he talked about that? Was it with glyphosate?
Yeah, that's a good question. I have heard, I think dandelions are good at, I think that things that are weeds are often good at cleaning the glyphosate out of the soil. And whether they can actually metabolize it or whether they just soak it up and therefore if you eat dandelion greens, you're getting a lot of glyphosate. That might be true. I don't know. I always wonder, I really want to know, did they get rid of it or did they just soak it up, But I've heard that, and even like marijuana, like you can grow these kinds of interesting herbs in a way, I suppose. I don't know whether anything that can remove the glyphosate from the soil, you have to wonder whether it actually got rid of the glyphosate or not, and whether there was a capability to break it down. And I don't have enough knowledge to say.
It's interesting you bring up marijuana cannabis, I wonder if a lot of the psychosis that people get, I mean, the THC is just north of 20%. I mean, super unnatural, right? And barely any CBD. It's just out of balance. Like they breed it to get people high.
Yeah.
But I wonder, do you think the glyphosate's contributing? I mean,
Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know. And I do wonder about glyphosate in the weed because I think we're worrying about medical marijuana and hopefully it's organic, but I don't know, because if you're taking marijuana, taking CBD oil and you're getting a glyphosate in it, that's not good.
yeah, I smoke generally a cigar a day. Sometimes, 5 days a week, I'll take days off, and I take care of my lungs and my dental and everything. And I'm very conscientious about how I go about it. But I'm a fan of not only the nicotine, but all the terpenes and the unique compounds.
Yeah, right. I know. They're so interesting, aren't they?
But now,
And even I think cigarettes is another one of those things where they say cigarettes are so toxic, but there's so much toxicity that goes into tobacco. Tobacco is a GMO Roundup Ready crop. And so when you smoke a cigarette, you're smoking glyphosate. And maybe that's the reason why they're toxic, right? I mean, I don't know that the nicotine is really, they're pointing the finger at the nicotine, but I'm not sure that's what is the real toxic, element in cigarettes. It may be what makes you get addicted. But in fact, I heard someone said they switched to organic cigarettes and they lost the addiction aspect of their cigarette smoking once they smoked organic, which makes me think the addiction may have to do with the cigarette is actually providing you something that's actually helping you fight the poison that it's also providing you with. So you get into a vicious circle where you keep taking more poison, but also getting the thing that helps to treat the poison at the same time.
interesting. Yeah. The guy that works for me, basically GC, he smoked, I think it's Marlboro Red or whatever, one of the big cigarettes. And I'll have to tell him that. Have you heard about the filter, how birds use that to build their nests?
Oh, I don't know about that. Wow. Oh, gosh. uh, that's probably not good.
um, See if there's anything else. Parkinson's disease. Do you think there's a connection there with?
Absolutely. Yeah. There's even studies that show that looking at agricultural workers. I remember there was a study thinking it was Parkinson's disease. I'm pretty sure it was, where they looked at all these different chemicals that they're exposed to, and then they sorted them out. So if a farmer is exposed to multiple chemicals, so they had to kind of do correlation studies to kind of correct for all these other chemicals. And when they did that, most of the chemicals got better, and glyphosate got worse. Like glyphosate had it was like the only one that got worse once you took out the others. In other words, glyphosate may have been the one that was causing the problems that were associated with the other one.
That is why. Well, it's funny talking about nicotine. Supposedly, that's one of the treatments for Parkinson's, or at least.
Yeah, I know. And nicotine is also, some people have said it's good for COVID. Have you heard that?
Yeah, yeah. It's funny because
Smokers were less likely to die from COVID, which is really interesting. I mean, tobacco is a good source of sulfur, and sulfur might be part of the story as well. Because sulfur, I'm a big fan of sulfur.
Interesting. Okay. I was starting to say caffeine and alcohol as well, although I'm sure alcohol is the worst, but the study I saw linked nicotine and caffeine was like the poor man's COVID cure, essentially.
Yeah, interesting. Well, I love caffeine. Organic coffee, that's my favorite every day.
My own beans and super filtered water. But yeah, I forgot to talk about the sulfur piece. I know we're a few minutes left here, but we'll have to just keep it going at some point. But
yeah, I should probably say the things that I really support, which is a high sulfur diet. So garlic, onions, lots of herbs. I really like herbs and spices. It's to spice up your food. High fat diet, and I like saturated fat. There's it's had a bad record, but it's not true. I think saturated fat is very good, and then also sunlight exposure. I'm a really big fan of sunlight, and then of course fermented foods. I generally think maybe it's mostly like a carnivore diet that I would say I have. It's sort of going back to, or paleo, right? Paleo, because I don't eat a lot of carbs, but I eat mostly fresh vegetables, fresh fruits, meats, seafood, and herbs and spices and fermented foods. That's kind of my diet.
yeah, I'm pulled to the seasonal thing. Like I just planted 25 fruit trees, which I'm so excited to, hopefully next summer they're really going off. But right now I have raspberries going off, and
That's lovely. Yeah, raspberries are great. They're hard to get too, and yeah, it's really great to have your own supply. We have a star fruit tree, which is quite fun. It's producing tons of star fruit right now. They're funky fruit. I don't know if you know star fruit, but they're fun.
Had it. Yeah,
And we have a tangerine tree as well. We just have those too, but
that's
better than nothing.
yeah. Yeah, it's sad to look at. I mean, whenever I go down to see my family, like, is how much wasted space there is. I'm like, oh, you could fit 10 fruit trees right here.
Yeah, you can grow a lot in a small amount of space.
Yeah. Well, Stephanie, this was so much fun. It was a good crash course, and I recommend people check out your book. It's fascinating. I'm excited to continue reading it. And for me, the whole like mineral disruption thing is probably the most interesting, but it's all
Yeah, that's definitely part of the story. And of course, the gut microbes are being messed up. Dysbiosis.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a fun thing to research, though. I mean, it's just endless. So,
Yeah, it's a fun molecule to study, I have to say. I've enjoyed studying it. It's kind of a window on your health because you see the ways it messes it up, and then that helps you understand how the health works, how your biology works
mm.
by
Oh,
virtue of it being broken.
la- super quick last question. I don't think I've asked you this. Is there a test we can get to see how much is in our body? Are you aware of it?
There is, yes. You can just go online and you can just you can even do it through a mail system. You get a urine sample and you ship it off, and they get you back a result. I've done it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I've tested my deuterium, which was fun. I tested the deuterium of the water here too. So
And how did that come out?
it was, oh, what was it? 134 per.
That's excellent, actually. Was that in the water? In the water. So that is probably spring water from the mountains, right? That's awesome. You're lucky with that. I tell you, that's fantastic. I spend a lot of money. This is deuterium depleted water, but it's expensive. I drink it every day.
It's good stuff. Yeah, I had a Victor Sagalovsky, a light water on the show. Slow down.
Yeah, good for you. Yeah, he's the one, of course, who introduced me to it, and I buy his product.
Yeah, there's different ones. That's a whole rabbit hole for cancer, and I have the book on that deuterium and cancer.
Yeah, it's so interesting. We could do another episode on deuterium for sure. I'm so excited about deuterium. So we didn't get into it today, but we could follow up in a few months or something. If you're not tired of me.
And it's your website, stephanieseneff.net. Is that right?
That's right. Yes.
Fantastic. All right, Stephanie.
And my book is available in German now, I have to announce. There's a German translation that's available. I have a link on my website.
Very cool. Yeah, I love how easy to read your book is. It's a very enjoyable read. So. Stephanie is one of those people that I could just speak to for hours and hours. You could tell that she's had quite a life so far and is very knowledgeable across a lot of different areas. Obviously, the more I learn about glyphosate, the happier I am that I'm gardening indoors in a 40-foot geodesic dome from the company Growing Spaces. Of course, it's not perfect because there's fans that are blowing outside air into it. And maybe I could put on filters and get crazy. But I don't think the goal is perfection. It's just doing better than what we've been doing. I'm inspired by a friend of mine that I know, Charles Barber, that has a lot of farm experience. And his goal is minimal outside input as far as additives that you put on the garden. So that is the direction that I would like to go. And I'm pretty far from that right now, but at least I have a direction that I'm heading. I highly recommend reading Stephanie's book, although I'm still getting through it. It's really fascinating, all the different areas that glyphosate affects. Again, the name is Toxic Legacy, and her website is stephanieseneff.net. My website is matt-blackburn.com. You can see all of my recommended products up there, the CLF protocol that I designed, which stands for calcification, lipofuscin, and fibrosis. 3 things that accumulate in the body over time that contribute to many different disease states. My supplement brand you can find at mitolife.co. And even more than just supplements, I have a really clean shampoo and conditioner. I sell grounding sheets. And announcement there, the grounding rod kit, which is an add-on, actually was just upgraded to copper instead of silver. So that's a really cool design, and it works with the existing sheets. If you already own a sheet, you can upgrade your grounding rod kit. Those are in stock now. And I've gone back and forth over the years with, is this placebo? Obviously, you can see the changes in red blood cells with live blood microscopy. But I've had phases where it gets disconnected and I'm not aware of it. And I notice, like I did a couple weeks ago, that the rod was not in the earth and the cord was disconnected, reconnected it, and my sleep just went to a whole nother level. So that's an experiment that you could do if you're a skeptic. Plug it in one night, unplug it, of course, rod to earth if you can, and see the difference, how long it takes to fall asleep. What I've personally noticed myself is it acts like melatonin. I feel wired if I'm not grounded. And of course, I could still sleep if I'm traveling. I just megadose of melatonin, which is much more than sleep. It's an antiviral. It protects against EMFs. It regulates so many processes in the body. Sleep is just like 1% of what melatonin does. It's a mitochondrial enhancer. I normally take 200 milligrams every night, but when I'm traveling, I'll take at least 800 milligrams and sometimes an entire gram or 1,000 milligrams of melatonin. And to me, especially pulsed, it's very safe. I'm not convinced that it lowers our own production. To the contrary, research shows that it actually increases our own endogenous production. And all of the different angles that you hear that people argue why we shouldn't supplement melatonin, I have not found to be true. I sell 50 milligram capsules on the MitoLife site. And if that scares you, you could buy the 5 milligram and maybe just take 4 of them or 5 and start with 20 or 25 milligrams. I would just warn you that the grogginess comes from underdosing. So I can't make a blanket recommendation of where everyone should start. Where I started when I learned about the power of melatonin and the safety of melatonin, most importantly, was at that 50 to 60 range. And I think that's a decent starting place if you want to experiment. I'm designing a new water filter that I'm really excited about. In 2017, I started using this device. I'd love to have a show on it and interview this company. They're called BioWell, and it's a gas discharge visualization camera. And they have them at some health clinics. And it's basically a little box that you stick each finger in one by one, your 10 fingers, and it sends a little microcurrent that you can't feel, but that stimulates a release of light from your cells. And we know that the cells emit extreme low frequency UV light. It's part of cell communication and part of the whole symphony of human health. But we can use it as a diagnostic tool, and that's what the inventor of this did, Konstantin Korotkov. And it uses traditional Chinese medicine, meridians, and all of these other things that basically brings those readings together to show a visualization of your biofield. And you could use that as a sort of diagnostic to see what's going on in the body. And I think in the last year or two, they've added upgrades where you have to pay more for looking at the spine, the teeth, the 3 doshas to see where you are on the balance of your dosha system. And of course, just like the spectrophotometry, like the oligoscan, it's all in the interpretation. And I'm such a novice with interpreting this, but you can do very simple experiments before and after sort of things. But the reason why I bring all of this up is they have different things you can connect to the device to read the environment and energy shifts in the environment, but also water. And I've never really experimented with their water sensor until today. And I posted it on my social media. And it's really cool because my tap water, it's not like city tap water. I run it through 4 different whole house devices. It gets structured, it gets vortexed, it runs through crystals. There's a lot going on. And this is spring water going into it after going through a very basic filtration system. Because I'm on a spring, I don't think you need reverse osmosis water, especially me being off grid. Whole house RO takes actually a lot of electricity, as I've learned over the years. But all that said, my tap water is very high energy, very clean. But compared to the new MitoLife structured water unit that I'm developing, it was still less energy. So there was a 0.20 increase in the energy of the MitoLife water versus just coming out of my faucet, which is really cool. And the other aspect was there was a lot more fluctuations. So it was less stable. And to me, that means the water's more dynamic, more alive. So very excited. I'm working on finalizing the box design, and I'm really trying to release that here in the next couple weeks. So stay tuned for that. It's Matt Blackburn on Instagram, MitoLife on Instagram. That's where you can keep up with the latest updates. Of course, subscribe to the newsletter on the website. We don't send spam. It's all very informative, important stuff if we send an email. And excited to get your feedback on that filter. So that wraps up today. I'll see you guys next Friday. Stay supercharged.